This month, we're focusing on the youth and parents, and we're hoping to share the fundamentals of bank accounts, budgeting, and college planning. Today, we have our guest speaker, Mike Paul. He's the Executive Director of Financial Aid at Columbia College. So we're going to hear on how to prepare for college, which is a big expense that we want to make sure that we plan with enough time, but it doesn't become that intimidating that we decide not to go to college. Because once we have control of our expenses, of our money, then it's easier to tackle. So that's part of today's discussion on how do we feel about finances, how do we prepare for them, and how do we gain control of whatever feelings come up or the barriers that can be real of not having enough resources or enough to cover those large expenses. So I'm going to walk us through to a couple of slides first, and then Mike is going to walk us through the piece of college planning. There will be some time for Q&A, which will not be part of the recording. We will stop the recording at that moment, but then feel free to use the chat and to follow up with these conversations, which, like as I mentioned before, this is part of our monthly webinar. So we meet again in July 27th. So if you have questions, we hope to see you then. And my name is Jumelia Abramson. For those of you who have not met me, I'm the Director of Program at UNHP. Welcome to the Ask UNHP for our youth. This is the first one we do this month, so depending on interest, we may be able to repeat this. And that's why we're recording it, so we can share it with some of our other high school students, some of our young workers. If you're getting your first paycheck, we want to make sure you're prepared and avoiding fees this summer. All right, Laura, if you can take us to the next slide. All right, so today we're going to cover a couple of things, and some of them are going to feel like a lot. And just let us know how it feels to those right now in the room. If you have other questions in one particular topic, let us know so we can slow down. If some of it feels too watered down, we can speed up. So we want to record it, but we also want to tailor it to those that are in the Zoom room right now. So we're going to talk about paychecks and bank accounts. Just give me 1 minute, Laura. We're going to talk about budgeting, and then we're going to talk about planning for college, which is usually one of our biggest expense. All right, next slide. Thank you, Laura. So what comes up when people hear the word money? What feelings, what images, what emotions? If those here in the chat room can type in the chat, and I welcome our staff also to participate in this. This is not just for our young students, but also stress. I see one word there. What else? Planning and stress. So stress it came up twice. So money usually is associated with like debt. So that's why it comes with that feeling of feeling stressed, not having enough. What else? What other emotions? Maybe our young person in the room can say how do they feel? I know you're a little busy right now, but so how do we change some of this narrative? Because those description of stress, overwhelm, not having enough, they're not positive, right? It feels very negative, very one-sided. So how can we regain control of that narrative and make it a little bit more positive, or at least neutral, so it doesn't become as intimidating? And that's what we're going to try to talk about today, because if you plan for it, if you know how much money you have and how much money you need to get those other big ticket items like college or the new pair of Jordans or whatever it is that's going to motivate you to save, then you are in control because you know how much you have and how much you need to get there. So let's keep this in mind on how you felt at the very beginning and how we can sort of prepare to be less stressed out as it relates to money. You can go to the next one, Laura. All right, so pay stubs. If you are getting your first summer job this summer, congrats. That's a big step. But it can also be a stressful one, as we just saw some of you write. And why it feels stressful. It's stressful because as soon as you get this pay stub, which many of you will not receive a physical copy. If you're getting direct deposit, the money may go straight to a bank account, but you would get a statement that sort of looks similar to the one here at the bottom of the screen. It would say void, meaning that it's not valid to be cash, but it was deposited to a bank account. And then I've enlarged a fake pay stub here so you understand what all these numbers mean. So first, the first number here is the pay period. When are you getting this paycheck? So this is from August of many years ago. You would see it for 2023. And then number two, you would see your gross wages, how much you made before taxes were withheld, either voluntary or your mandatory taxes. And I'll talk a little bit more. In New York City, you pay federal, state, and local taxes. So sometimes this gross wage number will be significantly reduced. In number 9, we see the net pay. So after all these other deductions are subtracted, you will be left with $155, which is the net pay. So from the number 2, gross wages of 200, after everything else is deducted, you will end up with the net pay. And when we're creating a budget, we want to look at net pay. That's what you're taking home. That's what you have available to spend and to cover your expenses. So it's very important. I'm just going to be real quick on these deductions and what they mean. So we pay federal taxes, we pay FICA, we pay Medicare, we pay state, and then in New York, I mentioned that we pay local taxes as well. You may have some voluntary deductions here for retirement. If you have a retirement account, as soon as you become available, as soon as this becomes available to you, I recommend you start saving for retirement. The earlier you begin, the more compound interest it's going to accrue. And we'll touch very briefly on that, but we have a financial coach on site that can help you go over all of these terms that I'm just throwing at you for you to find out how does this relate to me later on. And if I have a question about compound interest, how does it accumulate over the years and what benefit does it give me in the future? Any questions on this so far? So before we move on, the number that's also very important here is YTD gross, which is year to date. This is how much you've made up to this point for that year. And pay stubs are usually based on calendar years. So from January 1st till December 31st, all of year to date gross will be accumulated there. So then you can report it on your taxes. We file taxes usually from January through April, and you would declare how much you made the previous year. So from that January to December, you would declare that amount. Any questions on deductions or anything covered here? No? All right, so let's go on to the next one. All right, So like I mentioned, your income comes from this pay stub, what you're working, or it can also come from allowance if you're not working yet and you're younger, but you're helping around the household with the dishes, taking the garbage out, or just helping babysit your younger siblings. You may be getting a stipend, an allowance, which then you can add up. Hopefully you're saving part of that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But any money that it's coming in, that will be your income, right? So it could be that gross earnings or the allowance that you're receiving, which is what you earn before any deductions, leaving you with the net income, which is your take-home pay. And that net income is what you're gonna look at for the budgeting again. And I'm gonna repeat this several times because it's very important that when you're planning on what you can spend, you never think of your gross pay, because then you're gonna be overspending. You're gonna be spending money that you actually don't have. It's not gonna, those $200 on that pay stub, it's not what you're gonna receive. You're only gonna receive those 155. So any expenses that you have should be based on that net pay. This is why you should spend less than you earn, so you have a cushion and you're not overspending. And then you want to acknowledge the difference between a want and a need. And sometimes this is not very clear. Even as an adult, we struggle with this many times as to like, what is it that I want? And what do I need? A need is what is an essential? What do I need to survive? So you need food, you need shelter, you need clothing. That doesn't mean you need the latest name brand clothing. It doesn't mean that you need name brand or the most expensive or fashionable item. So that's where it becomes a little gray of like what's a need and what's a want. One other example I like to use is you may need a TV in your house if that's something that you enjoy, but do you definitely need all the streaming subscriptions? That's more of a want. And do they all add up, and do you have enough to cover it? So we'll talk a little bit more later on that, but like debating what are those needs and what are those wants, and how comfortable you are with delaying some of those things to come. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't get those fashionable clothes that you want, but you don't need to get them all at the same time. You may want to budget for them. You may want to save towards getting one of them a year, or seeing, depending on what income is coming in, seeing what's truly affordable. Because it's okay to allow yourself to splurge once in a while, but it becomes a problem. It becomes stressful, as you put it in the chat earlier, when you're doing it all the time, and that's putting it's putting you at a deficit where your income is less than it's more than your expenses. So you want to pay yourself first. You want to create a habit of savings. Paying yourself first is you're going to treat yourself as a bill. You're going to say, I'm going to save $5 each paycheck. And you're going to keep that going, because that's what you're going to use in case of an emergency. All right, so you're going to create some short-term and long-term goals. What are some examples of short-term goals? I've listed 2 here, but I'm curious to hear from you what could be some example. So I have clothes and sneakers. What are some other short-term goals? Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. A new cell phone. Yeah, a new computer or a laptop. Those are short term because it's smaller. Video games, yes. Because it's smaller. It's a smaller purchase. What could be long term? So I have here planning for prom. Prom now can be very expensive. College and getting a new car. What could be another long term large purchase where you may not have all the money, but you can probably use credit to finance that purchase to cover it? What could be some example? Buying a house, yes. So that's usually one of the big ones. Moving to your own apartment and getting that apartment furnished. So yes, I think you guys completely having a child. Yes, that is a big commitment. Usually for 18 plus year, you have that big purchase that you are responsible to cover. And even after those 10 years, I think it's forever. I know sometimes I still go to my parents to be spoiled a little from time to time. So yes, these are things that once it's broken down into two buckets, it becomes easier. Like, what's a short-term goal? What's a long-term goal? What am I saving towards? Because saving is not a marathon. You don't save just with no purpose. You need to remain motivated. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit harder to obtain that and to keep it up. Next slide, Laura. All right, so we spoke about those withholdings that you're going to see on your first paycheck. But there's also a form, a tax form that's given by your employer usually. It's called a W-4. And this is for your employer to know how much taxes you want withheld. This form has recently been simplified. So for 2023, it looks like this. You're usually only responsible to fill out the very top, step 1, and then step 5, where your signature and your date comes in. So in step 1, what you need to fill out is your name, last name, address, which usually people have no issue in completing this. Then the next section is like, what's your status right now? Are you married? Are you single? Do you have children? Because then it determines what tax bracket you're going to fall into. So if you're single, you're going to click the single box. And then there's one box here, what's your social security number? So all of our youth, you should know your social security number. And if you don't, this is one small task that you can begin practicing and memorizing your social security number. It is not a good practice to walk around with your social security card, because if you lose that, you can open yourself to identity theft and many other issues. So if you don't remember everything I'm saying today, and we will share these slides for those that are interested in, please remember to try to practice memorizing your social security number, because you're going to start filling out a lot of forms where your social security number will be important. And then once you complete the step 1, unless you have multiple jobs or your parents are claiming you as a dependent and you're almost making as much as them, this step 2, 3, and 4 are not important. You can bypass and skip them. This becomes a priority if at the end of the year you end up owing and you want to tell Uncle Sam, hey, withhold a little bit more from each paycheck because I end up owing every year. So that's when step 3 will be filled out. Otherwise, you would just sign it and date it, and that's it. That will be the W-4. Those taxes are helping you pay to have like paid street in New York, to fund the fire department, to cover some of the government expenses, and to fund some of the schools. So these federal, state, and local taxes are allocated for the services that we need as resident of this city. All right, let's go to the next one. I think we have a little break soon so we can do a little activity. And at that moment, I think we can stop the recording and then resume it, because then it may be a little harder to follow along. So what about banking products? Now that you have this paycheck or allowance, you need a safe place to put this. You need a checking account or a savings account to keep it secure. So banks, financial institutions, so banks and credit union, and we'll talk about both, are the best place to store our money, because if you have it in a shoebox, if you have it in the cookie jar or somewhere in the house, what could happen? Someone else can take it. If there's a fire, you're not earning interest, you can lose it, yes. So there's a lot of risk associated with just keeping the money at home. So our banking system is secured, it's insured. So the money that you have on both your checking and savings are guaranteed up to $250,000. And I'll show you what logo to look for when you're making those deposits to ensure that your money will be guaranteed, even if the bank was to close all of a sudden. And I know in the news recently, we've seen a lot of stories related to banks failing. So it's important that you know that your money is secured, but it's riskier to keep it at home. So let's say once we have this paycheck, and now we understand a little bit about the security of our banking system, we want to make sure we avoid fees when cashing our checks. So if you are working for the summer and it's through the Summer Youth Employment Program, SYEP, most likely you're getting paid $15 an hour, which is the minimum wage in New York City. You can work up to 25 hours a week for 6 weeks during the summer. So one paycheck could be $375 or more. I know sometimes you can be getting paid a little bit more depending on the internship or the program that you're in. But we're looking at the basic example. So $375 a week. If you go to a check casher around your neighborhood, which may feel very convenient, I want you to understand there's a fee associated for every time you cash that check. So in New York City, as of January of this year, that fee is 2.20, which doesn't feel like a lot, but once you add it up over the course of these 6 weeks, it could be a big chunk of your earnings. So over the summer, you can make $2,250 and you would pay $49.50 in fees to cash that check every time. That's 4 hours of work, which feels like a lot, and it should, because every dollar counts. So you should consider looking into free student bank accounts, which would allow you to keep your money in with no fees. And I can answer some questions related to that and what fees to look out for. But let's go to the next slide, Laura. All right. All right, right here. So what do financial institutions offer? I mentioned that there's banks and there's credit unions. So there's a lot of major banks. Credit union are usually smaller and not as known because there's not so many of them. And I want to see if you guys know the difference between a bank and a credit union, but they both take deposits, they provide regular statements, they issue debit card and ATM cards, they offer credit cards and loans, they pay interest for the money that's being earned. And as you may know, interest that banks pay comes from the deposit that they're taking. So like, let's say I go in and make a deposit of $200, and then Mike, who you're gonna hear from pretty soon, comes in and wants a loan of $100. They're gonna take my $200 that I've deposited and offer Mike 100 of those $200 and lend it to him with interest that he needs to pay back now. I'm not getting the same interest in my savings, but the bank is gonna make sure that Mike can pay that back. So if Mike doesn't have a good credit score, they're gonna probably charge him, let's say 15%, 18% interest, and I'm probably only receiving 1% interest on my savings. So when looking at products, you want to compare who's going to give you the most for your savings and who's going to charge you the least for the lending. And you want to become an educated consumer, so you can have that conversation as to like, what would be the best product for me? Because we're all individuals, so we all have different needs, and different products can be used to meet those needs. So what are the differences between a bank and a credit union? We know a lot of ways that they're similar, but one makes them different. And I have one here. A bank, you're a client, you're a customer. You walk in, so Mike, as a client, requested that loan. And a credit union, Mike is a member. He can vote. He has a voice to make decisions. Do we know any other differences between banks and credit unions? No? Credit unions are not-for-profit, yes, so they're CDFI for the most part, so based for the community, and yes, more favorable terms, because as a member, I want to make sure that I'm getting good terms, so I will make sure that those products available to me are the best rate possible. And yes, they have products that are geared for that community. So credit unions, usually they serve a particular population. So you've probably heard MCU, the Municipal Credit Union. It serves city employees. There's some credit unions that are for actors and artists. There's some credit unions that really have a core mission, and they're based on the mission or who lives close to them. So I'll speak about a couple of banks and credit union that we partner with, but you want to compare. You want to see what products they each offer and who can offer the best product for you. All right, next slide. All right, so this is the icon that I was referring to. So the FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is what you would see at the banks. When you walk in, it would usually be by the teller. This sticker will be there, reassuring you that the money up to $250,000 would be guaranteed. And when you get to the point where you have more than $250,000 in a bank account, just have 2 accounts, or talk to your broker on how to get more creative with your investment. And at that point, investments are not covered. This is this protection is for savings and checking. Money market account and more complicated products are usually not guaranteed. And then at the credit union, you would see this other logo, which is called the National Credit Union Administration. They're very similar, but one is for banks and one is for credit union. Things to consider when you're comparing those products is location. Is it close to you? Where you live, where you work, where you worship? You want to be able to like access your funds when needed. You want to know what ATM networks they're part of, because otherwise, if you're not close to them, can you withdraw money without being charged fees? You want to make sure you understand what the fees associated with them. Do they have high minimum balance requirement? What's the overdraft fee? And then do they have free banking products and for how long those are available. This is an example of Apple Bank, but we also partner with Ridgewood, with Chase, we partner with credit unions, as I mentioned before. So the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union, Neighborhood Trust. So if you want more information about that, let us know. But Apple and Ridgewood currently are promoting their youth savings, which have a higher APY. So that's the interest paid to you for saving your money. And usually they don't have monthly or maintenance fees. So, all right. I think we're gonna go to the game time, but I think let's pause the recording, Heather.
Okay, thanks, Jamelia. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Hall. I'm Executive Director of Financial Aid for Columbia College, which is the main undergraduate school at Columbia University, along with Columbia Engineering. And here to talk to you about college and really at a higher level, but enough to certainly hopefully whet your appetite about thinking about it, considering your options and figuring out how to pay for it, which is really where I come into play with all this. Okay, so first, yeah, go ahead, Laura. Next slide. When you're looking at college, you want to think about what kind of school do you want to go to, right? That is huge. There's so many different types of schools out there. They all offer different aspects and different things with regards to what you can study at those schools, what their social life is like, what kind of a community they live in. And a big one is how much it will cost. And there's a lot of variety in the costs. Everything from schools that will be completely free for you all the way to those that might cost pretty significant, even more than a car, or in some parts of the country, even as much of it as a house in other parts of the country. All right, well, let's talk about these different types of schools. Next slide there. Great. Okay, so first off is, we could break schools into a couple of big categories, right? So, on the one end, we have two-year public and community colleges. Hostos is one of those, close to UNHP. These schools are great if you're just sort of getting back into going education. If you've been away from school for a little bit, you want to start that and then transfer to a four-year institution. If you're just looking for a shorter program, maybe just some sort of certificate or an associate's degree, those are great options. They're generally the cheapest kinds of colleges out there. We also have the four-year publics in state colleges here in New York. That's going to be the SUNY system. And there's a large variety of SUNY schools, both close and upstate in other places. And then there's a large variety of four-year privates as well. And Manhattan College, save the name, is in the Bronx, and we love our friends there. So, okay, next slide. But as I know, there's other aspects besides just that type of school. And you want to think about what do you want and what's the best fit for you for your studies, right? So we have schools that are in urban areas, in cities, and Manhattan College would certainly be one of those versus suburbans and rurals. And if we look at these couple pictures down here in the lower left, we've got I believe that's Allegheny College in Western Pennsylvania. That is really far out and away from everywhere else. But down at the lower right, we've got UCLA, large campus, not in the heart of downtown, but certainly close to downtown LA there. You also want to think about what kind of a student body you want, smaller versus larger. And some schools may only have as few as 1,000 or maybe even fewer students. And some people do like that more close, tight-knit environment. But others want, the very large universities, the 25,000 plus types of schools, whether that be Penn State, Rutgers, or even schools like Columbia here in New York City. Different times there's the religious versus secular aspect about that, and athletics and activities. Certainly you're going to school for your classes, but what else is going on that can pique your interest? Do you want that sort of Michigan sports environment, or is that like, that's okay, I can live with other things as long as I have access to good clubs and activities throughout my time there. Okay, next up. All right, well, how do you apply to schools? I'll admit, this has actually changed a little bit in the past couple of years, but it's still pretty much the same. I think the first thing to do is to make sure that you're taking the right classes, right? So when you're in high school, you definitely want to be taking, a solid like 4 years of English classes, of social studies, science, and math, like those 4 core subject areas. You want to take as many of those as you can throughout your 4 years there. When you're a junior in high school, maybe in the fall of your senior year, you might want to consider taking the SAT or the ACT. This used to be a requirement for just about every school out there. However, since the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of schools are making this optional now. So they'll accept your test scores if you decide to take them and send them to the schools, but it's no longer a required portion of applying. So think about it. That's why I put the maybe there. It might be one of those things that you take the test, and if you did well compared to that school's actual averages, then you submit your scores, but you're not required to. So you don't have to do that. The next thing you want to do is create accounts for the application systems. Now, most schools will be on 2 different systems called Common App and the Coalition App. There are going to be some schools like state systems or CUNY who are going to actually have their own system to actually apply. So not everybody's on Common App or Coalition App, but a large number of schools are. And you want to go ahead and create your account and start to populate it with your basic information so that you can just get that whole process started. For a lot of schools, in particular the 4-year schools, whether public or private, you are actually going to need to get letters of recommendation. So talk to your teachers, talk to your guidance counselors. Those are going to be the ones that really matter. If you have a job, certainly having your supervisor write a letter for you, or if you're on a sports team, having your coach is helpful. But really the most important for the recs are going to be your guidance counselor at your high school, as well as any teachers you choose to submit those recommendations for. Okay, then once you get all that stuff together, you've got your accounts, you're in your the fall of your senior year in most cases, you've got your recommendations lined up, you submit your applications and transcripts and recommendations, and then unfortunately you just have to sit and wait to hear back. Some schools will be pretty quick if they have something called rolling admission, but other schools will have deadlines where they just let everybody know on a periodic basis there. Okay, thanks, Laura. All right, now I talked about how to apply, which is certainly important, but now into what's really in my wheelhouse. How much does it cost? And wow, $24,000 here. I think this is SUNY Cortland, if I recall, pulling it up. And that's a lot of money. That certainly is a lot of money there. But also, read the fine print. And this was a great example when I saw this one. So you're looking at this, you're like, okay, $24,000. Okay, maybe with some loans and financial aid, we can figure that out. But you start reading this and it's like, wow, okay, so that's for one type of room on campus. But there's others that are probably more expensive than that. It's the silver meal plan, whatever that exactly is. There might be a gold meal plan that costs more. They talk about some fees that are not there. They're optional. You can get them waived, but they're not listed there. So you might get some surprise bills if you're not careful. The bottom line is, when it comes to college costs, pay attention to the details, read the fine print, but you could also reach out to financial aid offices to get help in understanding the bills and the costs and things like that. But we'll actually talk about some other tools as well. All right, next one. So I picked that first slide, a state school that was kind of middle of the road, $24,000. I know that sounds like a big number, but hang on a minute. I put a couple other examples here. We've got Kingsborough, which is down in Brooklyn there, for a full year, full time. And actually the one on the left is a New York City resident there, New York State resident, $4,800 a year for everything. So a good bit less than SUNY school there. And if you're from outside of the area, then they're going to charge you a little bit more. And then up top, I actually put ours, Columbia, $86,097 this past year. That is a big number. But I could tell you, there are many, many, many people here who pay nothing close to that. And we have some students here completely for free. So, these are what we call the sticker prices of college, right? And what I'll say is a lot of people don't pay these sticker prices. A little bit more probably pay them at the community colleges, but in general, you do not pay the sticker price. That's where financial aid comes in. All right, so next slide. So what do we really cost, right? So, okay, we throw these really big, massive numbers out there, on our school websites and different places. And there are certainly people who pay that. There's no doubt, even here at Columbia, there are people who are paying close to $90,000 a year here. But a lot of people, if you can't afford that, then the financial aid is available to help make it much more reasonable for you with regards to your costs. But how do you figure out what you actually pay if everybody's throwing out these big sticker price numbers? Okay, well, the first thing is that every school out there in the US anyway, is required to have something called a net price calculator on their website. We got a nice little picture from NYU's there. These forms can sometimes take a little bit more time to actually go through there. But there's also another great tool called My Intuition that asks actually only a handful of questions here. And Laura, actually, if you can give up screen share, I want to pull this up real quick, and it'll literally take about 2 minutes to go through an example here. Nope. Oh, so undo your screen share. Let me see if I can. Yes, I think I could take this over actually. So we're good. All right. Let's see here. And okay, yes, you can see my screen here. So My Intuition, if you come to myintuition.org, and there's a number of different schools here that, as soon as it loads here, real quick, that use My Intuition. So for any number of these schools, which are mostly four-year privates, but these are some of the ones with the biggest costs, you can very quickly figure out what those costs are going to look like. Okay, so I won't do Columbia right now, but let's maybe pick Hamilton. Let's pick another New York City or New York school. Certainly not New York City here. And we're going to come through. Let's keep it simple with regards to this: a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, both parents, the students not divorced. That's okay there. Let's see, there's no other siblings in school. Let's say maybe the family makes $55,000 a year. Let's see here. Does your family own the home? Nope, not necessarily. You know, we're thinking New York City family, like a lot of people don't actually own, they rent, and so that's okay. Do they have a regular checking or savings? Yep, let's say they do. But maybe not anything in terms of retirement, and not necessarily investments either. You know, so let's see, maybe they have $1,500 in the bank. And let's see, and with just those couple quick minutes there, we could see that at Hamilton College, you know, on average, it might cost this family about $5,600. They are going to throw in some loans there and expect you to do a work study, but they're going to give you close to $70,000 in grants to help cover their cost. So we talk about these really big numbers, but then there's an awful lot of help to help figure that out. And not everybody does loans, and you know, and these numbers would vary as well. So I think for this same family, you know, that number would be $2,400 would be the cost of the family and the students, and we would have no loans here. But the other great thing is also gives you kind of a range, right? It says your cost may be as low as $2,000, but you know, in the high end, you know, don't worry so much about the high end. That's really for people who have businesses and other stuff that really complicate the numbers. So My Intuition is a you know, an absolute great tool to help figure out what certain colleges are going to cost and very quickly and easily do that. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to turn it back over to Laura. Laura, if you can share again and move on to that next slide. Okay, Laura, you got that, or should I can maybe take it over myself? Okay, you know, I will grab. Oh,
I can share for you.
okay, I can do it too.
No, give me 1 second. I get it. I was just trying to get the slides back.
Oh,
All right. Can you see it?
go ahead and hit present, and then I think we're good.
Okay. We're good there?
Yes, now we are.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura. Oh, back one. Okay, so how do you get all this great aid? So hopefully I showed you that you could definitely get lots of great financial aid to attend college, but how do you actually get it? Most students are going to need to complete the FAFSA and the New York State TAP application. There's two on the left there. The FAFSA is going to be for any U.S. citizens, permanent residents, you know, anyone who has asylum status, you know, what we call eligible non-citizens. Unfortunately, if a student is undocumented, you would not be filling out the FAFSA. But even if you are undocumented, you still can qualify for financial aid from New York State and apply for the TAP application. So just about everybody watching this, you definitely want to do those two applications there. You can Google those if you don't see the links in the chat, and both pop up pretty quickly there. If you're applying to some of the private schools, and actually some more public schools are starting to use what's called the CSS profile. This one's a little bit longer of a file of an application to fill out, but it definitely gets you a lot of money for the schools that use it. So those are the three. Definitely FAFSA and the TAP application, depending on the school, the CSS profile there. Okay, a couple of key things. You're going to hear me say this one, actually a couple other times. Keep track of deadlines and apply early. So here's a key thing. This applies to both admissions and financial aid. You need to apply by the deadlines, or sometimes you either don't get admitted or you're not going to get the aid, which is tough thing. You're maybe admitted your dream school, but you didn't meet the financial aid deadline, and so you're not getting any aid, and that's a tough pill to swallow there. So watch your deadlines. A key thing is that these financial aid applications generally open up on October 1st every year. However, this year, there's a little different. There's something called FAFSA simplification going on. I won't go into all the details of that. They're trying to make the whole process better and easier at federal student aid. But the problem with it is going to be that they've already told those of us in the financial aid community that the FAFSA is not going to go live this year until sometime in December. We're guessing actually late in December, or maybe even January 1st. So if you're used to, there's a sibling who's applied for aid before, you're used to that October 1st deadline, or for October 1st date, that's typically what it is, but this coming year, it is going to be a little bit different. So, okay, next slide. All right, another thing is, how do you compare financial aid awards, right? So, I mentioned when we were looking at my intuition that, Hamilton College in that case was putting loans in its package. And at Columbia, we actually do not package with loans. We do not ask students to borrow to meet their financial need. Students can still certainly borrow if they need to, and if that's their only option, that's certainly an option they have. But it's a difference in their aid packages, right? So you want to be able to compare these packages, because it's, schools, they don't, when you look at our eligibility letters or our award letters, they're not always apples to apples, right? We're talking about different things. Some schools will package with things like Parent Plus loans and other items that really are not as helpful. But there's this great college cost calculator out there that actually allows you to put all the information in. It asks you lots of different questions. This is by far and above the best one I found out there by a group called UAspire. And UAspire, they help students figure out the financial aid process for college. They are a nonprofit. They are not tied to any particular school. They're not tied to any banking institution or lender or anything else. They're just a nonprofit, so you will see some donate buttons when you go on their website. You do not have to donate to use their tools, but their college cost calculator is great. You tell it every school that you have a letter from. It'll ask you specific questions like, what was the tuition on that letter? What are the grants? What are the loans? And then it organizes everything to show you really which schools are the best, the sort of the best deal for your money there. And then, okay, well, when you take the loans into account, what is your bill actually going to look like and things like that. So, but a key, effectively what that is doing, you could do this on your own. You first off look at the letter and figure out, well, what are the direct costs? Things like tuition and fees, the dorms and the meal plans, and then subtract the scholarships and the grants only, and that's it. And that's really what the college is going to cost you. So that's the number to be comparing across different schools. You don't want to take into account the loans when you're comparing who's giving you a better deal. You want to compare what's that bottom line bill going to look like before any loans, and then you can put the loans on afterwards if you need them. So, okay. So a couple of tips and tricks here. Admission, as I said earlier, I'll say it again, pay attention to the deadlines and start early. I can tell you that a lot of schools have a January 1st deadline for their applications. And it's funny how many submit at like 11:59 on December 31st. Instead of celebrating the new year, they're submitting their college applications. So start early, get them in by the deadlines, because anything after a deadline, a school can say, sorry, we're not taking your application. Proofread your application. This is something that schools expect you to put a lot of effort into. And so you don't want to slip up by, grammatical errors, spelling errors, and things like that. For that, I'm actually going to jump to the bottom. Make use of your support network. Have your teachers, guidance counselors, your parents, everyone, have them look at your application too, just to make sure everything is there. Be authentic. Really let yourself shine through, right? You're with your application, you're trying to tell the college or the university who you are. And the more authentic you can be about why you're applying to that school, who you are, what your interests are, that certainly can come through on an application if you put the effort into to do that. And certainly I can tell you admissions officers like to see that. They'd like to have a good feel for who the student is whenever they're admitting a student. So research schools that you are applying to. This is critical. You don't want to say, oh, I want to major in say mechanical engineering, and the school doesn't even have an engineering program. So you definitely want to know the schools you're applying to and what their interests are, and go from there. A funny story, when I used to be in admissions and read applications, I think it was TCU down in Texas, and their mascot are the Horned Frogs. And a student wrote an essay about how one of their favorite things in science class was dissecting the frog. Well, I can't imagine that played too well with that school's admissions office, dissecting their mascot. So know your school, know different aspects about them, know why you're applying there, and let the school know through your application as to that you know about the school, you've researched school, you've taken that time to get to know them. Okay, and let admissions know that you're interested. You can sign up for mailing lists. That's entirely free. They'll send you emails. They'll send you publications. You can attend virtual sessions. And if you're able to, and obviously it's due to either distance or cost, it's not always possible, but make a visit to the school. Certainly if it's a local school, they're going to want to see that you came out to see the school when they're reviewing your application. Have some safety schools as well as reach schools. Hey, you never know with regards to the reach schools, and these days there are a lot of fee waivers, so it doesn't actually even cost you that much, if anything, to apply to more schools. And certainly have your safety schools. If you're looking to go to college next year, you don't want to be a student who's stuck at the end and wasn't admitted to any particular school. And last, as I mentioned before, use your support network. Your high school teachers, guidance counselors, and community-based organizations are there to help. UNHP, I think it's a little bit more on maybe the financing side, but QuestBridge is an absolute great organization to help you with the college search process. All right, and some financial aid tips. Let's make that money rain there, and a lot of it, hopefully. Lots of $100 bills there, but certainly you need a lot of it to help fund college. Okay, so again, pay attention to deadlines and start early. I'll say this: a school like Columbia, we can actually award aid after the deadlines, but say some of the state funding like TAP awards or other schools, they hit their deadlines and that's it. You apply after the deadline, you do not get aid. Double check the numbers that you're putting on your applications. I cannot tell you how many times someone thought they had $1,000 in the bank, they put an extra zero in, and oh, that looks like 10. I've actually seen it even higher, like a family they have $100,000 home and they put it as $1 million home, and we're wondering why they weren't qualifying for financial aid. And once we figured that out, it was fine. But double check your numbers, make sure they're right. Let the aid office know of any special circumstances, right? So everything you tell the financial aid office is going to be confidential. They're not going to go around, talking to anybody else or even any of the departments on campus. Everything stays confidential within the financial aid office. So any special circumstances regarding your family situation, your finances, that's something that the aid office could potentially take into account. So the more you tell them about your situation, then the more they can take that into account and hopefully give you some more money there. Now, there's some misconceptions out there like, oh, geez, well, this is all they offered me and that's it, end of story. First off, you can always appeal for more aid, right? Now, that's not to say you're actually going to get it, but you can always ask the aid office for more money. It usually happens best when you're giving them more information. You're like, oh, well, here's something that's new or something I didn't tell you about. That's generally when it helps best, as opposed to just walking in and saying, well, I just need more. So think about, or they're thinking why you need more. Is it because a parent lost a job? Is it because maybe a family member passed away and then some funeral costs? Things like that. Let the aid office know about those, and they will certainly be able to take some of that stuff into consideration. And let's see, your first choice school. If it's not your cheapest option, maybe you've been to visit your dream school, but it's not the cheapest. Take those offers from the other schools and say, hey, hey, Fordham, I really want to be here. But you know what? Someone else, Manhattan College over here gave me a better offer. Is there something you could do about that? And, again, it's not guaranteed, but there are certainly a number of times where schools will be able to offer you more aid because a different school gave you a better offer. Schools certainly want the students who want to be there. And if they need to just give you a little bit more money to make that happen, they'll do that. And again, last tip, make use of your support network. In addition to the ones on the other page for admissions, I'll say, financial aid offices. We're here to help families and students figure this out. Okay, and Jamelia, I guess you can come on back on and some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that wealth of information. I'm sure we're going to be sharing this video with parents in our network, with the youth, and we will definitely circulate it. I do have a question before we stop the recording. I know you spent a good amount of time on the tips and tricks of application and also the financial aid piece, but can you talk a little bit on how it plays for family that are low income? That example that you gave was $50,000, like someone that was making $50,000. What if they have some savings and the child has a 529 account who has done well? Like how would that play with the aid and with the grants and the scholarships that come?
Yeah, sure. So what I'd say is, in general, savings get counted less heavily than income does, right? So, let's say a family even had maybe $50,000 in savings. Like, I don't think that would dramatically change that example's financial aid there. 529s are a great example. Those historically have been considered as part of an asset that needs to be considered. In the future, with this whole FAFSA simplification, it looks like those are not going to be counted in the future. So actually, a 529 plan, that's a great thing to bring up. It's a little bit more some of the details of saving for college. But if you are the parent of a younger child, those are great things to look into. There's going to be some benefits of those in the future in terms of how those are considered. That being said, those schools using the CSS profile, they may still look at that. But again, assets don't get looked at quite as heavily as income does in the financial aid formulas. They get looked at, but they convert at a lower percentage is kind of the best way to say it.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know if there's any other questions, but I think that's a great segue to how the financial coach can actually support our young applicants and the parents. So we have a financial coach here at UNHP, and we, as you alluded, we have there's a network and there's resources to help the student navigate this complicated process. So Laura, I think the next slide shows what a financial coach can do and some of the questions that students can be asking. So yes, we cover the purple box, which is the FAFSA application, but then there's the credit piece. Like if you're gonna need loans, in addition to the student loans, then your parent, if they're applying for a Parent Plus loan, their credit report and their credit score is gonna play a role into that. So meeting with the coach to see those beforehand, before you're applying for these loans. The financial aid piece, your tax return to know what your family annual income is. Understanding the terms of the student loans. I know right now we're, many of the students that have already graduated and have student loans that can be in repayment are looking the possibility of them being forgiven if you work for a nonprofit, or just them being eliminated, or if someone is disabled after graduating college. So exploring those options. And then going back to that budgeting piece is very important. Once you have something in front of you and you know what those expenses are, what it would cost you, how much you're making, then you can make a realistic plan to know how much you can really save. So the financial coach is here Tuesdays, every other Tuesday from 10 to 6. At our office, you can meet virtually or in person. And in addition to talking about college, the financial coach can look at any of these pieces independently. So if credit or debt or anything along those lines is a concern, that's what she's here for. So thank you. Heather, I think we can stop the recording now.